Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It's your Cape Crusader Cody, and we're keeping it geeky with two of our guests, Chuck Satterley and Jeremy Maggart. We're here to break down monsters and midways and everything in between. Jeremy and Chuck, welcome to the stream. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, doing good, man. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it, Cody. I've been looking forward to being on your show for a while.
Absolutely. And Chuck, like I said, man, you've been on my radar too. I know when I first started doing this, I've seen you on Twitter. We've been in a lot of spaces. There's Jason in chat right now. Welcome to the stream, Jason. I had the chance to read Monster and Midways issue 1, and holy crap. Dude, this art is so gorgeous. The book, I loved the writing, everything in between. And just like some of the different like things that happened within it. But before we dive into it too deep, though, I'd always like to start having the show start off on a right note, and that's with the introduction to who you guys are and how you got into comics. So, Jeremy and Chuck, if you guys like to go ahead and take the wheel, feel free.
Go for it, Chuck. Once you start it out.
Okay. Well, I'm Chuck Satterley, and I'm old. I got into comics quite a while ago. Took a little bit of time off. I'm back because COVID made me bored, I started. I got into comics. It's a long story. I won't bore you, but my first book was a book called Agony Acres. Did that a long time ago. My claim to fame on that book was really cool because I waited in line with an ash can to show George Perez, and I'm like young and I have this black and white ash can that I photocopied at Kinko's, and I showed it to George Perez, and he had a line of people, and he read the whole damn thing.
Wow!
It was the first comic I ever did, and he looks up after he was done, and he goes, he goes, "I'm going to ink your covers for you, so you can say that I'm on your art team because this is a good book." And it was like, holy shit, So that was my first book, and then I did a whole bunch of other stuff. Of Bitter Souls with a guy named Norm Brayfogle. I did 13 Steps with a guy named Phil Hager, and then I adapted King of Skull Island, and then some other stuff, and for like 10 years. And now I'm back working with Jeremy, our partner on Monsters, Nick. I'm doing 3 other books that are coming out this year, and probably will have another 2 books out this year as well. So it probably will be 6 books, 6 series this year.
Man, you almost had no choice but to like start something in comics after having that introduction. That is crazy, man. Holy crap. How did that feel? Like getting him, obviously you wanted him to read it, but when he was like, "Yo, let me ink this for you," like that had to just blow your mind.
My initial thought was, I can't afford George Perez, but then he's like, I literally said that, and he goes, no, I'll do it for free. Just take me out for dinner. So the artist on that book, his name was Ron Stern. We took him out to, where I take everybody to dinner who's in Chicago for the first time. We took him to Lou Malnati's Pizza. I'm waiting for a huge insult from Jason. That'll come soon. I took him to Lou Malnati's Pizza. It was wonderful. It was insane. I can't even, I can't even explain it. I got to have dinner with George. I got to know him. He's, and we lost him this year. So, or last year, excuse me. I'm still getting used to it being 2023. But yeah, it was awesome. It was great.
Oh, that's such a cool experience. Jeremy, what about you? I love your work so much. It is so gorgeous. Can you give us a little bit about how you got involved in doing comics?
Oh, thanks. So I drew a lot and started reading comics, what a lot of people do when, you're a kid, you've got spinner racks, and back in the day when you had bookstores and malls and all that kind of fun stuff. And that was full of lots of Spider-Man and Batman comics, because I think that's just what was on the spinner rack, And then that led to definitely the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends cartoon, which was hugely influential for me as a kid. And then, in college, high school, I wanted to learn how to draw people. And so I decided I was going to go and get some comic books to learn how to draw people, which is not a good way to do that, but that's what I did. And I bought, I just was in this comic shop. Don't even remember which one it was, but
every time somebody.
What was that?
Hello?
Oh no, I apologize. I think the internet was going in, and I apologize. Every time somebody says Jeremy, Jeremy's art is amazing on this book. That Jack Nicholson meme or GIF?
Yeah,
that's how I am every time. Just because Jeremy's absolutely badass.
Oh, thank you.
We have Jason. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go for it.
I was gonna say Jason in chat over on YouTube saying comics were 10 cents each when Chuck started out. So the shade already begins.
Sorry, I have something on my forehead.
Go ahead, Jeremy. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's all good. And bought there was I believe it was Wolverine 75, and that was from the Wolverine run where you had Larry Hama and Adam Kubert on it. And right around the time when Wolverine kind of first lost his adamantium, and there was something about Adam Kubert's art that was really inspiring for me. It was kind of the first time when I really recognized, the difference between one artist to another, and how awesome he was specifically. And then there was a lot of stuff I read that was significant, but then I kind of got away from comics. And then in my later in life, I decided I kind of wanted a career change. I wanted to do something that had a little more meaning to me personally, and kind of fit some different criteria that are important for me for choosing what I'm going to do. And comics sort of fit these three criteria perfectly for me. And, and that was kind of at a time when Greg Capullo was coming back to comics. And so he was drawing Batman, and he had been, Spawn for a long time, but then was kind of gone for a little bit. And that was a big thing to kind of get me back into it. And then I picked up another book that was written by Scott Snyder called The Wake. And seeing Sean Gordon Murphy's artwork was another thing that really kind of inspired me to give comics a go, because at the time when when you look back in kind of 2000s and I went to high school in mid 90s kind of deal, there were so many clones of the 90s style, and a lot of guys were drawing Jim Lee and a lot of artists, like Mark Silvestri and that kind of stuff. And I just I just can't swing that kind of an art style. So that was another reason why I kind of stepped away, is I just didn't feel like there was a spot. But then now, when I went back and I saw the Sean Gordon Murphy, the way he was drawing, and some other guys, it was really inspiring me to kind of really pick it back up again. So I would say that's probably my collective sort of origin story with it, getting back in.
Yeah, I was reading some Sean Murphy. I want to say Batman Beyond the White Knight. I want to say I love his work on that. It is gorgeous. You mentioned that you first started out by kind of drawing from references from comic books, and that wasn't too good of an idea. Was that because someone told me before that it's better to kind of draw off real life because you get a better idea of how things work as opposed to drawing off of pictures, So was that your experience as well?
Yeah, I was really just grabbing it for inspiration. I wasn't really copying the art inside it. Was really just kind of looking to pick up tips and things, and maybe some things I could figure out. But when you do that, you're never going to understand just looking at that stuff. You're never going to understand perspective. You're never really going to understand lighting, because at the end of the day, what you're looking at when you pick up a comic book is you're looking at someone else's interpretation of these things, rather than going to the source of these things kind of from the get-go. So you'll learn so much more about body language and how a body moves, or how things sit or stand or whatever. If you're using photo reference, or you're looking at real life people, you'll get a lot of, you'll get so much more mileage in terms of learning from that, in my opinion.
No, that is awesome. So how did you two meet? How did you two join forces, and how did Monsters and Midways come about?
I will let Chuck tell this one. I think he tells it better than I do.
Well, I had caught some of Jeremy's artwork, and then I kind of threw it by a friend of mine who is much bigger and better known than I and Jeremy. And he had already had Jeremy kind of on his radar, and he's like, yeah, man, he's great, and I said, do you think that he is ready? Because I had not met Jeremy yet, and this is a long time ago. Actually, this was for a different book, and then because I was thinking about getting into comics again, and had a talk with Jeremy, but then we kind of didn't really take it anywhere, and then COVID hit, and then Monsters and Midways came along. That is a story in and of itself. That my neighbor at the time and friend Nick Goodwin, he's never written a comic book before, and I tell this story all the time, but it's the truth. Jeremy, you can back me up on this. When you're in comics of any kind, whether you're published or not, or you're just making comics, people will tend to come up to you, friends, family members, and say, it would make a good comic. And they're always throwing stuff at you. And Jeremy, does that happen to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you get kind of, when you're a creator, you kind of get numb to it, because you also care about the people that are saying this normally, because it's probably at Thanksgiving or it's somebody you like, and so you don't want to hurt their feelings. But the truth of the matter is that most of the time, oh my God, they're terrible ideas, And so I got my that's nice. Yeah, you should flesh that story out. Kind of thing. So I got that response ready. And Nick told me the seed of the idea of Monsters and Midways, and I found myself thinking, well, shit, that's actually good, and so I kind of shelved it. And then when I decided to make comics again, I called Nick up and I was like, hey, man, do you want to do that book? And he goes, yeah, and I was like, okay, let's do it. And then I called Jeremy or text or whatever. I got a hold of Jeremy and I said, hey, do you want to work on a different book? This is what it is. And Jeremy was like, hell yeah, let's do this, and here we are. The first piece of art I ever saw by Jeremy, I will get this printed on a piece of canvas someday, but it was a piece that Jeremy did that actually was an afterthought for him. He drew a building and then at the last second slapped Batman on it. And I loved it. Just like, oh, I want to work with him. That's what I originally saw that I talked to my buddy about. And then, and then here we are. The best laid plans of, the best intentions. Here we are a long time later, because Monsters and Midways has hit speed bump after speed bump that has nothing to do with Jeremy, myself, or Nick. So we are now at Band of Bards, happy as can be, because Band of Bards is fantastic. Tim and Chris at Band of Bards are awesome people. The other creators at Band of Bards are great. Megan, who handles a lot of the retail stuff, is great. They're just all good people. And so while it took a long time getting there, we are at where we need to be today.
So what were some of those speed bumps, if you could talk about? Because as much as I love promoting, creators on the show, I think it is kind of important, like when, you guys are wanting to examine those. So when people are listening, they can know how to react and handle it.
Sure. If it's all right with you, I'm not going to name names. I'll just tell you.
Yeah, that's fine. No names.
Tell you the situations. So the first publisher that we signed with was not really ready for prime time. They, in my opinion, they talked a good talk, but ultimately they haven't solicited in Diamond for, what is it now, Jeremy? A year, right? It's a year this month.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah, and things were starting to sound a little bit hinky, and so a lot of the creators started asking the fellows questions, and they just basically said, look, if you want out, you can get out. And so Jeremy and Nick and I, with no safety net, were like, yeah, you know what, we want out. And it was the right decision, because they haven't really done anything.
Well, usually when they're like that easygoing about it, there's something in the, something going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Look, I don't want to say it was nefarious, and I don't want to say it was incompetence. I don't know.
It was questionable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want. I don't
That's
hold any.
that's the questionable is the nice way to word it.
So that's a scary situation. Like, what was your guys' next move? Like, because going from having a publisher and then
it literally was just like we just did it.
That's how bad the situation was. We would rather not have a plan than have a publisher that we didn't feel comfortable with.
Yeah, because on top of that, we had no idea with what was going on. We had no idea if the book was ever going to come out, and that was the number one priority above anything else, was getting the book out into people's hands so that they could read it.
And then a year later, it looks like that came true.
Mm-hmm. And then we had speed bump number 2. A few months later, another publisher signed us because Monsters and Midways is a good book, you know. So we got accepted again, and this publisher, this guy is a good guy. There's no nefarious, there's no questionable in this guy at all. It just, they had some internal issues. They're publishing today. They're a good publisher. It didn't quite work out on the timing. So we'll probably go to that publisher again at some point. But there was a deadline set. The deadline went and passed, and I had already placed Christopher Kubrick, Nebraska, and Matilda Save the World from Fucking Nazis that I'm writing with Jason in the feed right now. And Jason Michalski, who is a great writing partner. I will compliment him, even though he won't compliment me. He will insult me multiple times tonight. I'm just going to take the high road. I don't know if it's the high road. I've never taken it before. But I'm going to try to take the high road. Anyway, I'm kidding. So I had already had a relationship with Tim and Chris at Band of Bards. And so I was having a conversation with Tim, and Tim's like, dude, bring Monsters and Midways to Band of Bards, you know? And I called Jeremy and Nick, and I was like, you want to go to Band of Bards? And we were both, and all three of us were, yeah, let's do that. And let me just say that it's a great experience. You know, so as I said, yes, speed bumps galore, a year longer than we thought, but we're where we needed to be because we're happy.
No, I mean, and I think that just really goes to show you that, like, just sticking to the plan and seeing the vision through, you know, that's important. That's the big part of it. And now here you are. You have how many issues? 5 lined up, if I'm not mistaken.
5 issues.
Yes.
So seeing it through, you know,
and let me just say,
off.
This has been the hardest on Jeremy. So Jeremy's been like a goddamn trooper, because you know, it was supposed to go differently, and Jeremy is stuck in, and he's been the best. So you know, I just want to make sure that does not go unsaid.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and you know, it's unfortunate, you know, as an artist, you have to put so much work into, you know, detailing these pages, making sure they look right, and all that. So much goes into it. And Chuck, that's one thing I love about you, just from Twitter. You're always the first to credit your team and make sure they're acknowledged as well.
I mean, if you don't credit your team, in my book, you're kind of a dick. You know, because these comics, they get made by lots of people. You know, Jeremy toils away at turning out fantastic line art, pencils and inks. It gets handed off to Nicholas Michael, who, whoa! I mean, you saw the colors in the book. That color palette that he chose for this book is insane. Nicholas Michael, what a choice! That was Jeremy's choice. Not that it wasn't my choice. I didn't have a choice. Jeremy just said, I like him. And I was like, okay, you know, because I don't know what I'm looking at.
Found him randomly on Twitter. Craziness.
Yeah.
So, like, what? Oh, sorry, Chuck. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. I was just going to also mention that we have a fairly decent letterer. You know, he's lettered a couple things.
He's done some stuff.
Tom Orzechowski, The Letter of Spawn and Days of Future Past.
Wow.
Well, and of everything, all time. Quite frankly, he is literally the Guinness Book of World Record holder for most consecutive issues of a comic letter, Spawn. You know, so our team could be better. I guess I just don't know how.
Yeah, it
I
sounds
guess
like
if somebody
you
else
have some
was
heavy
writing it,
hitters.
I just want to beat Jason. I want to beat Jason to that. Yes, if somebody else was writing it, it would be better. But
Speaking of Jason, we have Half-Life Comics. Can we get Cody to say Jason's last name? I'm not saying it until April, all right? And I might have Chuck come on as a substitute to say it for me. Anytime there's multiple syllables, it throws me off. Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah.
For everyone watching, it is New Comic Book Day. Here are the preview links to these awesome comics. You can pre-order them right now. When they're in stores in March 29th.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes. It's the book is actually going to debut at C2E2.
That is awesome.
We'll have the first copies of the book will be at C2E2. Band of Bards will have a table at C2E2 as the plan goes right now. And we'll have copies of Jeremy's cover and of Ben Templesmith's variant cover. And the Ben Templesmith variant cover is going to be cool, as I understand it, because we will have a literal metal cover. And
Fitting though.
I don't know if you noticed, but the cover for the variant by Ben for the first issue is a homage to Heavy Metal Magazine #1, which came out the same year Monsters and Midways is based. So and the lead character Dave the Barbarian's a heavy metal guitarist. So heavy metal everywhere. So the Band of Bards guys were like, let's make it a metal cover. So we'll have a metal cover at C2E2. That'd be awesome. That's
so awesome. So Jeremy, I was going to ask, when you found the colorists, you said you found them on Twitter. Like, what really caught your attention to say that's the person?
It was a few things, and I saw him on Twitter, and I shot his stuff over to Chuck to kind of get the ball rolling. But there's one of the things that Nicholas is extremely good at is depth with color, right? Because all I have is black and white lines, and he can alternate warm and cool colors and really do a magical job of separating, like the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, and just really adding so much depth. And with monsters, and he was like, do you want me to color it like it? I'm like, no, man, I just want you to do your thing. And, I don't ever want to tell him like, oh, I want you to color this, like this book. And, I just really wanted him to go to town and, really help nail the sort of 70s vibe, because I use a lot of photo ref in terms of like clothing and the city of Chicago, and there's all this stuff, but I can only do so much, right? Because then so much of the 70s look, right, is there in issue 1, there's the avocado green fridge, and there's things like that you have to put in there if you're going to show an apartment to accurately date the book. And, while we are definitely as over the top as we possibly can be with a lot of stuff, it helps to ground the book with things like, with, as goofy as it sounds, with an avocado green fridge and with green shag carpeting and just kind of goofiness like that. It kind of anchors it into the time period. And, and another thing I don't really say, I haven't just said much often, but, I've worked with other colorists, but there's always a thing where somebody, where I see my art colored for the first time, and there's always like an adjustment period where I'm like, huh, interesting. But every time I see his stuff, I never have that. It's immediate. I'm just like, oh my God, that's amazing. And that's with every single thing that I've seen him that he's turned in. Like everything has just been absolutely like magical from the second I see it.
The relationship between the artist and the colorist is so important. So it's awesome to hear that it's almost like organic for you two. But the relationship between the writer and the artist is just as important as well. Like Chuck, Jeremy, how does that work between you two when you're working the script together?
Jeremy.
Well, I mean, I don't actually really work on the script with Chuck.
Well, I meant like doing like he gives you the script and you do the art from it. My apologies.
Oh no, it's all good. It depends. Some things he will write, pretty thoroughly. Like if he's got a very specific idea, and there's some things where he'll be like, just give me, if where it'll be sort of just 3 pages of this, and we kind of run with it, and then he may, script it afterwards, depending on what he had in mind. And so, with that, I think we were a pretty awesome, well-oiled team in that regard.
I like working with Jeremy because, first of all, he understands the script is a skeleton. The script is the story, but I am one part of the storytelling. He's the other part of the story. Nick and I. Nick does the story with me. I write the scripts, and then Jeremy does the art. But he's the other half of the storytelling. So I have full, complete confidence in the fact that if Jeremy doesn't even have to call me or text me or anything. He can just do it and tell me he did it if he wanted to. That said, Jeremy always calls me and discusses things when he has something. We were talking before we went on live about that 2-page spread. I could tell you a story about that. That it was giving me fits forever. And I wrote this 2-page spread that Nick and I called The History of the World Part 1. And it was so damn jam-packed. I didn't even feel comfortable giving it to an artist. And Jeremy just finally contacts me. And this is our first script. We're on our 4th script now, Jeremy and I. I have more trust in him and he has more trust in me. But I feel like if he read that, I don't know what you thought, Jeremy, but I feel like if the first time he read that script with that freaking ridiculously stupid double-page script, he's like, "What did I get myself into? This guy does not know what he's doing." But Jeremy came up with a plan to fix it, and it turned into it extended the pages to 2 more pages, and it turned 1 double-page spread into 2 double-page spreads in a row. But it worked, and he did a fantastic job. But that was our first issue, and it was a huge problem. But I think we worked great together. I would love to do another series with Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always going to be like writers that are going to be watching this, and when it comes to changing stuff, I don't really change things specifically. Like I don't go and like take stuff out or whatever. Usually what I'm doing is if I'm making any changes to what's there, it's sort of an enhancement, or I'm kind of moving things around, or there's rules for the page and stuff like that. So everything I do, I never take anything out of what Chuck has written. It's usually just adding things to enhance it or move things around a little bit, and that's really one of the things I like to kind of bring to a project.
And he's the I don't want to curse, even though I curse all the time.
You can cuss if you want to.
Well, okay, he's the fucking Easter egg kid. But the other thing that I want to say is he talked about it, but his attention to detail, man,
gorgeous. We
have a don't punch me. We have a car, Kessler's car, and it's a Cadillac. It's a big black Cadillac. But what I really appreciate is that when you look at that Cadillac, the freaking logo has all of the little parts of the Cadillac. I mean, it's like, you didn't even have to do that. Everybody would have known it was Yeah, he did it.
Oh, I'm sure. Jeremy. I'm sure you would have known though, and that's as an artist.
He does things that he doesn't need to do because he's so damn particular and detail oriented, and he's a perfectionist. And I'm thankful for it, because how lucky is a writer when he gets a partner like that?
Yeah, and for me, it's not as much like that. That I personally care about, like the dots on the top of like the Cadillac logo or whatever. For me, I just, if it's close enough that can be seen, right? I know there's going to be somebody that's going to look at it and, maybe they're going to be like, oh, that's not enough. So, for me, it may take a few extra minutes to do something like that, but I feel like it's worth it in a period book to kind of have, because also this was the first period book that I'd ever done. To me, it's worth it to have that attention to detail, like in small things, to kind of keep it real.
His Vietnam soldier uniforms are authentic.
Oh, I love that scene so much.
Everything is so authentic with him. It's so there's this one panel, I want to say, was it issue 2 or 3, but he put this I don't want to ruin the surprise. It's not giving away the story, but it's giving away the Easter egg, and I don't want to give it away. But it was a car from a famous movie, and he's like, do you notice the Easter egg in there? And it took me like 7 tries. I was like, oh, the bus, this, that, and he's but then when I looked at it, it was like, yep, that's exactly what it is. His attention to detail is second to literally none.
It worked out too, because it was a car from a movie, and the year of the car from the movie happened to work out that it was like a year or 2, I think, before when the comic took place. So like it lined up perfectly, because also that movie takes place in the city of Chicago.
Oh, my gears are turning right now. I'm like, I almost wanted to say Christine.
Do you want to give it away, Jeremy?
I can if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's the Ferrari from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, that's so awesome.
It's that, and so like I forget like what year it is, but the scene lines up to where, because it's also in Chicago, that it's basically it's Cameron's dad's Ferrari from Ferris Bueller.
That's so cool, and I bet it was
so fun. He does that all the time,
drawing a Ferrari too.
Yeah, and they were just like, I was like, well, now I need to find the car, and I need to find photo rec with an angle that works, that I can draw it, and then the funny thing is, I mean, it's just like parked on the side of the curb in front of like City Hall or something like that. I forget where we were, what the location was, but and it's just parked it's just parked right there, and then behind it is a bus, that's era accurate, that I believe is on its way to Wrigley Field, if I'm not mistaken.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
For everyone watching, we have the links to the 2 different covers right there dropping. It's New Comic Book Day. Be sure to pre-order them. These are out in your local comic book shop March 29th. So what's Monster in Midways about? We talked a whole lot about, your guys' history, what went into this. I don't think we really kind of talked about the basics though.
Yeah. Jeremy, do you want to do it?
No, man, it's all you.
Okay. So Monsters and Midways, our elevator pitch is kind of says it all, but I'll go into a little bit more detail. But essentially, the 1970s heavy metal guitarist in Chicago hasn't gotten very far. It hasn't been very successful with his metal songs about elves and wizards and magic. So let's see how he does with the real thing. In Monsters and Midways, wizards have been around since the dawn of time. They are immortal. Think Highlander. They can be killed, but if they aren't killed by another wizard, they're going to be immortal. There are other magical beings. One type of magical being is a barbarian. Barbarians have very long lifespans, but they are mortal. They have the ability to wield magic weapons. And then there is a third species of magic being, and that is a mortal, normal lifespan maker. They make magic weapons. And then there are elves. And our elves are a little different than normal elves in like Lord of the Rings or whatever. Mm-hmm. In our world, elves are people of not all people of color are elves, but all elves are people of color. And this is the 70s. I'll get back to that in a minute. So you have magic. You have these different folks. Magic since the beginning of time. There's good magic. And then there's dark magic. And dark magic tends to seep out, release itself from the Earth's core, and dark magic mutates animals into monsters. Dark magic is responsible for the Loch Ness monster. Dark magic is responsible for Bigfoot, for the comic book Yeti. I'm sorry, the Yeti. And
I'm actually wearing a comic book Yeti shirt.
yeah, they're great. And then all of it. So for years, all these wizards were good, and they essentially, kept a handle on the dark magic, to the blissful ignorance of the world. They kept it secret from the world. Now, that dark magic could only be kept in check by these golden seals, and the only species that can make these golden seals are the elves. They make these seals and they keep the magic out. Now, at some point, some of the wizards decided, why are we protecting these humans, these idiots? Why don't we rule them? Why don't we? There was a rift. Some wizards went dark. Some wizards went good. Ultimately, that created a eons-long war between the wizards. Now there are two left. There's Corwin, who is actually a human being possessed by the spirit of one of the wizards. And then there is Kessler. And they find themselves in Chicago in the 70s. There is a huge leaking dark magic area in Chicago. And Corwin, the evil wizard, has this idea. He's going to mix nuclear energy and dark magic. He's one of those people that just wants to see the world burn. And
nothing could go wrong.
Yeah. And so that, Kessler is there to stop him. They put their teams together, and each has a maker and a barbarian. And what I really love, I did not write this, Jeremy did. He surprised the hell out of us. Dave is the good wizard's barbarian. He's metal. So Corwin has a barbarian, and he's disco.
That is so awesome.
So we're gonna have a battle of disco versus metal, of the battle of the barbarians, disco versus metal, in the final episode, final issue.
That is so cool.
That was so genius. I never thought of it. That was all Jeremy.
So Jeremy, I was gonna ask. You got heavy metal. You have wizards, elves. The whole crazy fantasy setting. Like, how was this for you as an artist? Like taking this on and. With the different time periods, how much research did you have to do to make sure you got it right?
Tons of research on that end. I mean, just on my phone by itself, I think I have probably at this point, we are rapidly approaching like 400 photos of everything from like all the Vietnam stuff, I kept all of it because I don't know like what I'm going to have to like circle back to, so whether it's everything from that to clothing, to, police uniforms, police cars, the city, just all of that crazy stuff. There's just so much. I have, there's probably 50 pictures of just the Cadillac alone.
Well, in the first 4 or 5 issues of issue 2, there was all that Salem witch trial stuff. Yeah, there's Salem witch trial. So trying to find photos of like the church, because that's where it opens. And then that's definitely crumbled. So how do I figure out what that used to look like, type of deal. So there's all of that. But, for me with it being fantasy was really fun because outside of before this book, every single project I had ever done was sci-fi. And and not just like sort of sci-fi, with the exception of one that took place on Earth. Like everything was literally like full on outer space. And there was a point when, when I kind of hooked back up with Chuck, kind of, post COVID, and when he was kind of like, hey, here's a few different things. Which one do you like? Initially I was like, man, I've never done any superheroes or anything like that or whatever. So I wanted to do something that wasn't sci-fi. And then when I saw monsters,
and the description, and I was like, that's the one I want to do, because I was like, you know what, I was like, it's going to be totally different. It's going to be in a city. You know, it's going to have a time period. You know, I'm going to get to do still, because I love doing monsters and just creatures and stuff like that. So I'm going to get plenty of that in, you know, so, and that was really one of the things that kind of drew me was that it was a sword and sorcery book.
Oh, that is so cool. Once again, for the third and the last time, guys, right here are the links to pre-order this. We are getting close to having things wrap up, but before we do, what are you guys working on next outside of Monster and Midway's issue 1? I know you have a couple more issues coming out, but are there any other type of books that you're working on?
For me, it's mainly monsters. I am working on a couple small mini comics, like a mini comic and then a one-shot. And the one-shot is a little sort of like vampire love story that I'm doing, which I have it's in like super early like scripting and then layouts. And then I've got another little mini comic that I'm working on, and I'm going to bring both of these to also, I think, to possibly to C2E2.
Oh,
so that should be pretty fun.
So you're writing and doing the art for the vampire story?
Yeah, it's just something
cool.
to kind of have in addition to Monsters and Midways, just with the to kind of line it up, something else to come.
So
out.
Are we gonna see more writing from you in the future? Do you think you're gonna start taking that role on as well with like other stories, or?
Yeah, you know, if I have an idea and a story to tell specifically, you know, the vampire story was sort of, without going into it, is sort of based on a joke that I made to my wife, and so it's kind of a sort of like personal sort of love story in that regard that I made, and you know, and so that's what I'm working. And basically, it was this small joke of, you know, we were watching like a vampire movie or something like that, and I was like, I would totally eat people if we could live forever. And that was basically like the joke I made. And then so then I was like, as the story, and then I was like, well, okay, if we did that, but like, who actually would we choose to eat if we were going to do that?
That's a good question.
And that's really what the story is, you know, is these two people that, you know, that loved each other so much that they were willing to become vampires, and then who do they choose to feed on when the time comes?
Ooh, hey, everyone, stay tuned for that, because you're gonna have to figure out who it is. I'm curious as well. Chuck, what about you, man? What do you got up your sleeve?
A couple things. With Band of Bards this year, I have Monsters and Midways, and then I also have, like I mentioned before, Nebraska to save the world from fucking Nazis. That's done with Jason. I won't say his last name, and then Jeremiah Scheich. Who has a book coming from Band of Bards called Hush Ronin, and he's phenomenal. That will be colored by DC Alonso and lettered by Hector Negrete. And then from Devil's Due Comics, I have The Claims Adjuster, which is kind of you know, it's like Seven meets Falling Down meets Marvels. It's a serial killer. It's a superhero serial killer story, and that one is co-story Neil Van Antwerpen, who I'll get to in a moment, and then the art is by Laura Helsby, who's getting a lot of press right now. They're about to blow up. I think Jeremy and Laura are going to have a very good 2023. I think, and then. That will be colored by Leslie Atlansky and lettered by Chuck Molley. And then at Devil's Due also this year is No Other Gods. No Other Gods is written completely by me, drawn by Neil Van Antwerpen, inked by Mark Stegbauer, colored by Nicholas Michael again, and then also lettered by Tom Orzechowski. So those are the 4 series I have coming out this year for sure. And then you know, and then I'll be at every show selling the Of Bitter Souls omnibus.
Those omnibus look gorgeous too. Holy crap. We have a Half-Life Comics Monster and Midway. Sounds great. I have my copy pre-ordered from Thing from Another World. Thank you for the pre-order. We always appreciate that. For everyone watching, here is the link one more time. Now, before we end things completely, I always love asking for a little bit of advice, because as much as this is a show where we really promote your guys' work, there's often new people who are watching, and I'd love for them to take away something from it as well. So with that being said, I think we'll really capitalize on some of the bumps you guys had early on. And that is, like, for anyone who is looking for finding a publisher for the first time, what would you say your number one golden rule should be for them to, like, maybe look out for?
Jeremy, you want to? I mean, we could make that,
you know,
sure.
I mean, you know, it's tough because I don't want to give like a list of like, these are the warning signs, you know.
Or here, maybe let me rephrase that. What would be good qualities someone should look for when approaching a publisher?
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, you start with looking at what they publish. You know, does your book fit? You know, don't just, you know, don't spam like every publisher, you know, you can find necessarily. And, you know, I would say maybe the value of a relationship is probably the best thing you can possibly have. You know, like, I don't know if I know the story of how Chuck knows everybody, which is, you know, kind of, you know, one of the great benefits of working with Chuck is that, you know, Chuck is like, you know, the sort, you know, if this was the Spider-Verse, Chuck is like the Madam Web of, you know, like the comics world to a certain degree. You know, so, but like, I don't know how Chuck like knows the Band of Bards guys, but when it came time to, you know, to switch, you know, to go with Band of Bards, you know, like Chuck, you know, we had the sort of resounding endorsement from Chuck already, you know, having a relationship with them. And to me, I feel like that is a pretty priceless thing to have.
I think that if you're going in cold though, and you don't have a relationship with a publisher, there are a few things that that should be good signs. Let's not talk about the red flags. I appreciate that, Cody. Let's talk about the good signs. Transparency, honesty. You know, if they're not selling 5,000 copies, don't tell us they're selling 5,000 copies. If they're selling 800 copies, then tell us that. You know. Let us make decisions based on truths and facts. So openness, honesty, transparency are all good. Communication. You know, I have one friend who has his first book with a publisher right now, and I'll give you an example. He was supposed to have a meeting with this publisher. I don't want to say who the friend is. I don't want to say who the publisher is, but he had a meeting with this publisher to ask a number of questions. The publisher blew him off and didn't even call. Didn't even bother. Didn't even bother calling. So good communication. I'll tell you one thing: if Josh Blaylock at Devil's Due or Tim or Chris missed a meeting, there would be like 7 texts and a couple of calls telling us why they have to miss it and when we can reschedule, because they're professional, you know? Yeah. So I would say those are good things to look for. You know, one thing I'd add to all of it is this: you are not going to impress Image or Band of Bards or Dark Horse or Devil's Due with your new idea for a submission style. They put into their guidelines what they want their submissions to look like. If you're a professional, or if you're a comic book creator that wants to get a book published, follow the fucking submission guidelines. You know, don't think that your book is so damn good that you don't need to do it, because you do. I'll tell you this much: if there's a submission guideline and Phil Hester wants to submit to that company, Phil Hester's going to follow submission guidelines, so you probably should too. You know what I mean? That's one of the biggest pet peeves that publishers have. So don't start off on the wrong foot. You know, follow their guidelines. Do what they have.
Already have to go through so many submissions, right?
Yeah, I've said this before. I'll say it again, and it's pretty quick. Every comic book deal is a miracle. Because let's think about this, and I've said this before. There's maybe, Cody, 17, 18 publishers in the world that are taking creator-owned comics. You know, Go on comics Twitter right now. How many projects are there? Thousands.
Yeah.
Thousands. So just think about it. Those Band of Bards guys, Devil's Due, and especially like Image, Boom, Dark Horse, anyone with submissions open, they are probably getting. I bet Image Comics gets. I bet they get hundreds of submissions, maybe a week, for sure a month. So if you get lucky enough to even get turned down, you did well. You know what I mean? Where they actually reply. But why screw it up with screwing on the submission guidelines? So, but the other part is every comic book deal is a miracle. So treat it as such. Be grateful. We literally got accepted 3 times for Monsters and Midways. We performed 3 miracles. I mean, we practically have sainthood coming. But
I would prefer not to die for that to happen.
but yeah, follow the guidelines. If you're lucky enough to get a deal, treat it with the respect that it deserves. And then finally, don't call retailers on Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
No, I think some very sound advice. Thank you, Jeremy and Chuck. We have the Saints of Monsters and Midways here on the podcast. As always, greatly appreciated. Here are the links for the 4th time I'd lied, guys. But check it out. Be sure to pre-order in stores March 29th. With that being said, it is time for us to wrap up. I hope you have a lovely Wednesday night. But most importantly, guys, keep it geekly.